Together, just as a very brief intro here, this exhibition has been a long time coming. It was born from a local collector who had amazing artwork by local Indigenous artists, and really opened my eyes to the breadth of creativity and traditional practices here in the Little Traverse Bay area. As I started digging into that a little bit, there were some powerhouse names that I came across: Yvonne Walker-Keshik, Renee Wasson-Dillard. We've obviously featured a lot of Stella Kay's beadwork. But as I was just searching, I wanted to see, well, who's working now? What can I see that maybe is happening in an emerging capacity? And I came across the work of Becca Lynn. And I was really excited because her work was really current and really relevant and fresh and young, honestly. And as I was looking at it, I wanted to think about a way to include it. And then as I continued to build this exhibition, I discovered that Becca was actually related to other artists that I had been looking at for this exhibition. So what you'll notice in our Bonfield gallery is we have generations of bead artists. So you will see the work of Rita Gasco-Shepherd, and then her daughters, okay, and then their daughters. And so it really felt sort of like kismet to me to discover that not only did I want to feature Becca's work in this show, but that she was connected to this lineage and this idea of tradition that we wanted to express in the exhibition. So I'm delighted that Becca is part of the show, and even more delighted that she's here to speak about her work. And as we get started, I also want to acknowledge Good Heart Artist Residency. Becca is currently just moved in yesterday, I think, as the Good Heart Artist in Residence there. And what a great collaboration and wonderful support from the Kelsos who are here today to support local Indigenous artists through their programming. So with that, I would like to ask you to join me in welcoming Becca. She's going to tell us a little bit about her work.
Thank you. Let me get this situated. And hopefully you on Facebook Live can hear me. Hello, Ani Buju. I'm gonna introduce myself in the language first before I get started. So, Ani, Becca Indigenous, Nagizi Ndoram, Baraske Ndonjaba, Waganaxingo Dao and Dao. So what I said is that my name is Becca, as you've heard. And I am Eagle Clan. I am from Petoskey, Michigan. I actually grew up over in Odin. All the people that are local will know that little tiny place. I went to Atlanton High School. I was there through K through 12. I grew up really involved in the community, both at Atlanton. I was involved in multiple sports, as well as in the tribal community. You know, me and Sarah, who's down there, we started our Tribal Youth Council. We got to travel around the country to different conferences. And all of those experiences really led me to where I am now. After high school, I went to the University of Michigan and I studied sociology, and I had a minor in community action and social change. I have a lot of mixed feelings about my experiences there, but I'm grateful for all of them. I learned a lot, and it helped. A lot of the sociology helped me understand sort of the historical context about our community, learning more about boarding schools, learning more about historical trauma, learning about how that is within not only my family, but my community. And it's helped me grow a lot as a person. So I am the owner and creator and artist of QueerKwe Designs. I've been doing this for about 3 years. The whole mission of my work is to reclaim space for TwoSpirit and LGBTQ natives. Native people have such limited representation, and in any context, there's like this invisibility around us. You know, it's like this dirty secret that society doesn't want to acknowledge, but we're still here. We're still queer. You know, queerness has always existed. And I use the term queer in a very like loving and very, like reclaiming the term way. I know a lot of especially people from older generations think of that as a slur, and sometimes it's still seen as a slur and used as a slur. But I think that it's important for the queer community to take that term back, you know? So who am I? So as I said, I'm Waganuk Odawa. This is where I have been. This is where my family has been for generations. I feel so connected to this land. I'm so happy to be back. And I never really saw myself coming back here. I really struggled as a teenager with my queer identity, and I felt a lot of shame around that because there is no representation. You know, there weren't many LGBTQ people in my life. I thought that it was bad in some ways, you know, and I just kept it all inside and didn't think that I could exist here in this space as a queer person. And thankfully, being able to go to the University of Michigan and be in a more liberal, open area and meet with other queer people, I'm like so much more comfortable in my identity. I'm comfortable talking about it. I'm comfortable sharing about it. I'm comfortable educating folks about it because I think a lot of people are just curious and they want to ask questions, but they don't want to offend people. So I think that these open conversations are really, really important to progress, to create more safe spaces. I'm using the term TwoSpirit. TwoSpirit is a contemporary term. It was started, like it came about in the 1990s, I believe in Manitoba. That might be incorrect, don't fact check me, but definitely the 1990s. And it comes from an Anishinaabe concept. So that's why I feel so connected to that word, because it's a contemporary word to describe a very, very traditional cultural way of being. You know, it's having both that masculine and feminine spirit inside of you. And it's really hard to talk about in English because English is inherently so binary. English really wants to put things into categories. And Indigenous people don't fit into categories. Queer people don't fit into categories, you know? And so there's a lot of people reclaiming their identities and figuring out what that means for them. Some people, TwoSpirit just means that they are queer and they are Native. Some people, it's a gender identity. Some people, it's neither. Some people, it's both. But it is exclusively a Native identity. It is not appropriate for non-Native people to use that term and to identify with that term because of how hard we've had to work to bring back acceptance and space in our own communities because of the compulsory Christianity that was pushed onto our peoples during the boarding school eras and et cetera. Gender binaries and a lot of shame around sex and all of that really started during the boarding school eras where they took our kids from their homes and forced them into these schools to live a completely different way of life and told them everything about being Indigenous was wrong. And that includes queerness. So indigiqueer is like a pretty recent term, I'd say in the last couple of years. It's just a combination of Indigenous and queer. I feel like a lot of younger people are identifying with it. I identify with it. I think it's a cool pan-Indian term that we can all identify with, you know? I'll show you guys some of my art. I mostly do beadwork, mostly earrings and medallions, but I'm doing some collaborations with my family members as well. So we've got some ribbon skirts, we've got different types of like loom beadwork, which I haven't learned yet. There's a lot of like glass bead earrings that my Aunt Gina has made. And even my mom has worked with me to make pins and stuff like that for different events. I put activist on there because I think that owning this identity and being outspoken about it is activism. You know, just living in my truth is radical. And I wish that it wasn't. I wish that I could just exist, but I don't feel like I can. I feel called to do this work. I think that we need to have more conversations around sexuality and gender, especially in places like rural northern Michigan. There are almost no resources and no representation around here. And it is very, very harmful to our young people who are going through discovering their identities and exploring that. And a lot of this work is really, for me, is for the younger generations. Like I'm willing to educate older generations and have these conversations, but I want to do this work to show the young ones that it's okay and that they've always belonged in our community and that they're sacred because they're Indigenous, because they're Two-Spirit, because they're queer. And I'm an entrepreneur. I got a business. Which has been really hard to navigate. I'm a little bit all over the place as a person. So the business sides of running a business and running an Etsy and running social media sites, or not sites, but pages, is a little bit difficult for me. And I have a lot of anxiety around written communication. So I'm working on all these things, pushing myself outside of my comfort zones when I can, but also being gentle with myself because this is all new and I don't have a script to follow. You know, I don't have a template because there's not a lot of people doing this work. So I'm just winging it as I go, doing my best to have good intentions in everything I do and say. And I hope that comes across. So these are some of my very, very first beaded earrings that I did that were pride. Because I was taught beadwork when I was younger by my aunt, and I hated it. I couldn't stand it. I could not sit still. I could not focus. I was also dealing with a lot internally and didn't want to sit still and didn't want to sit with all the mixed feelings that I was having. I was running away from those. And beadwork, you really have to be in your body. It's a really meditative practice. But I mean, I've beaded something for my mom. It was probably about this big. It took me almost 2 years. And my aunt would just have to hound me and tell me to stop talking and to bead, which I'm grateful for now. So thank you, Aunt Gina. But I started this work because one of my friends asked me if I stayed up here and I never left, when do I think I would have come out? And I had this really, really somber moment and really, I don't know if I ever would have. I don't know if I could have, you know? And then I thought about all the opportunities that I was given to go out and to explore and to find that independence and to find myself. And I was only allowed those things because I was good at school. You know, I worked really hard, yeah, but I was naturally good at it. And we know the education system consistently fails Native students, and these opportunities are not given to them. And so then I thought about all the young queer people on all the rural places in not northern Michigan, but the United States that don't have that representation, that don't have that access, that cannot leave, they don't have the resources, they don't have the ability to do those things. That I was really grateful to have those things, but so many people don't. And they're just stuck there, you know? They're code switching between their different friend groups. They are sitting with the women specifically because that's what they're told to do, even if they're non-binary or Two-Spirit or trans-masc. You know, they're just denying themselves these parts of their identities because they're scared. And not everybody, but there's a lot of them out there. And I was like, how can I do something about that? Because really taking in all of that grief and all of that pain was a really intense experience for me. And I wanted to do something about it. So I started QueerKwe Designs, and I figured I can't go to all these communities, I can't talk to all these people, but I can provide an online platform for them to see themselves represented within community space. And it's been a really amazing experience ever since. My family's been super supportive. My community's been very supportive. My friends are very supportive. My online community is very supportive. And now I moved back here and y'all are being supportive. And that makes me feel good, you know? To know that I can be here and do this work and not feel like I have to be a non-authentic version of myself. It's a really beautiful, freeing experience. And so as Liz kind of talked about, this is really continuing a legacy. I didn't get here by myself. I didn't learn these practices by myself. I don't come up with all these designs by myself. You know, I have a team of relatives here with me. I have a team of ancestors guiding me along the way. And I have a team of my helpers and spirit guides helping me come up with these designs and helping me push forward, you know? And I want to take a moment to talk about Anishinaabe Resilience, especially in this community, the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians, because we have sacrificed a lot to stay on these lands. We have adapted to our environment around us. Sure. So the Anishinaabe people are like the people of the Great Lakes. So that would be Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi peoples. There are many nations within the Anishinaabe between the United States and Canada. And so the word Kwe at the end just means woman. So it's a Anishinaabe woman. And when I was doing some of my research when I was an undergrad, I read about how this community specifically, how the women had political power through the fur trade by making things, by selling things to fur traders, by, you know, they had mobility in a time when not a lot of Native people, especially Native women, had mobility. And so we really transitioned from the fur trade to the lumber economy and to the tourist economy that exists here today. You know, because we've been able to adapt to these things, we're able to stay here and hold on to these practices. And I know so many Native women whose either side hustle or main hustle is making art, is making beadwork, is making baskets, is doing applique and ribbon work. You know, there's so much creativity in this community that it's unbelievable. You know, we have so many talented people. As you can see when you walk through these exhibits, there are so many different families, so many different people represented out there. You know, and that's all from our small tribal community here. And the fact that we've been able to bring these practices to today is beautiful. You know, that we were able to hold on to that and we continue to support ourselves is beautiful. And so I really hold that legacy true, as well as the family legacy. You know, I have pictures, this picture here, my grandma Rita is in the corner, and that's my mom and the little baby. So that's like the matriarch of our family. And I believe her mother's name was Stella and the grandma's name is Louise. I never got to meet any of these people, but I know that they're with me. And so here's me and my aunts at the opening of this exhibit together in front of the tribal flag, in front of my grandma's beadwork that was brought out from archives and everyone's individual collections. And then up top is the first time I set up as a powwow vendor with my family at the LTBB powwow. That was a really big moment for me, being able to be open and I felt very visible, very queer, and I was really anxious about doing that. And I received nothing but love and support from my community. And so that was a really beautiful experience. And then my cousin Sydney is also in that picture, who has work out in the beadwork exhibit in the back. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the process. It's kind of hard to talk with not actually showing you, but I mostly do, so brick stitch is more of like a weaving of the beads, right? So like these earrings here that I'm wearing, this is all brick stitch. So this is all one thread, well, two threads, but all the beads are woven and intertwined. And then I do fringe earrings, which are really popular and they sell really well, but they take a lot of concentration. And I don't always want to do that, you know? I'm not always into that. And so I do them in big batches and then I'll wait. And the one thing I love about doing this work is because I get bored easily. I can really just switch up to the different mediums. I guess not different medium because it's all beads, but the process of all of these, like switching from fringe earrings to the flat stitch earrings and medallions, it's very different. It becomes engaging again. So I've figured out ways to keep it entertaining and engaging for myself, both mentally and physically. These are some of the identities that I focus on. So from, is that your left? Over there? Right? Well, okay, so we got bi pride, we got asexual pride, we've got pansexual pride, we've got genderqueer pride, non-binary pride, and transgender pride. So you can see out in my stuff that is in the exhibit, I talk about those different colors and not what they mean, but you can very, very easily do that work on your own. You know, you just have to Google LGBTQ identities and you can do that. You know, you're allowed to do that. And it's nice as somebody that's doing this work to engage with people that come prepared, that don't ask questions that they can easily find. Not that I won't answer your questions, please feel free to ask questions, but also do your research.
We have a question online that says, how do you attach your pieces to the clasp? What type of clasp?
So for the fringe earrings, on the top row, I put 8 to 10 beads, and then I go through that with a thread at least 3 times to secure it. And then I use an earring hook that opens up at the bottom. I typically use these hook earrings because it's what I'm familiar with and comfortable with. And then you just secure it with some pliers. For securing things like those flat beaded earrings that are on earring hooks, so I would take fire line, which is a thicker, more synthetic thread. And then I use the fire line to make the part that you hang it on. So I'll just go weave in and out of the beads or in and out of the backing. And then I'll go through it at least twice with the fire line to make sure they're secure. And I do a very similar thing with the medallions. I just make sure, you just got to make sure it's sturdy, but it's all handmade. You know, there's nothing, things break, threads rip. That's the whole point of it being homemade. You know, it's not going to last forever, but it's going to be beautiful. And those intentions are put into that piece. You know, it's one of the trade-offs of that, but as long as you take care of them, they should last.
And then a follow-up, what size seed beads are you using?
So for the most part, I use size 11 seed beads. Like these are always size 11s. But like for the piece that's out there that I also have a picture of, I'll show you in a minute. I use size 11 or size 13 Charlotte cuts that are cut on the like sides of the beads a bit to give it an extra shimmer. And then sometimes I'll use size 15s, but I think that a lot of the designs I have are easy enough with size 11. So you want to use the smaller beads for more intricate work, which is why like the feathers that I did on the TwoSpirit flag out there, those are with size 15 beads because I had to put in all the markings of the feathers. So it really depends on what kind of project you're doing. And so and then like with the brick stitch, I use Delica beads. They're not rounded the way seed beads are. And they are more uniform in shape and size. So they work really well for this sort of brick stitch pattern. But they are more expensive for smaller quantities. Well, I think that it's important to remember that like Wabanaki people have always been very immersed in trade routes. You know, all of our things have not been from this community alone. You know, we had extensive trade routes throughout the nations, and the beads that we use now, I believe, are made overseas. I don't know if there's really a way to combat that, especially with pricing and such. And I've been reading more about vintage beads because they were made with actual minerals and actual gold, and the colors last way longer. But the process was kind of toxic and way more expensive. So now they don't have those minerals in them. I try to buy from Indigenous owned people that sell beads. You know, there's Powwow Supply Co. in Mount Pleasant. There's Knock Bay up in the UP. There's Indian Hills over in Petoskey. So that way, at least my money is going to support an Indigenous person or business. And so this is just some of the rainbow stuff I've done. Over there is a wedding medallion I did for somebody that reached out and wanted to get it for their cousin who was indigiqueer and getting married, and he wanted to gift them that for the wedding day. So I've gotten to do, and I just made a pair of earrings for somebody's wedding that I sent out yesterday. And it's been really awesome to be a part of people's big days, you know, to be, you know, I've made earrings and people send me pictures of them at their like recitals or their graduation, and knowing that that makes them feel a little bit happier, a little bit more secure, a little bit more visible during these special times has been really important and really fulfilling. And with like these, like rainbow flags are kind of everywhere right now, which I don't think is a bad thing. And these different pride flags are all very contemporary. You know, they're not traditional in that sense, but a lot of young people identify with these terms. And I think it's an important step in figuring out who you are. You know, because I've known a lot of people, including myself, where I identified as queer for a long time because my attraction and my gender identity were just non-binary, you know, like it depended on the person. It had nothing to do with their parts or their presentation. And then I really came into the term TwoSpirit when I was doing honors thesis on TwoSpirit identity formation, which I did not finish, but I got to do some really cool research and do some really cool interviews. But that was during a year where we also went out to Standing Rock, and I was dealing with a lot of PTSD from being out there and experiencing police violence. And that's another reason why beadwork has been life-changing for me. Not only have I able to support myself financially, but it has helped me work through a lot of trauma. You know, it has helped me channel that energy, be present in my body, and create something beautiful. And I think that we need to heal more with our hands and less with our minds, because there's only so much healing we can do internally. It's important to get that energy out. So here's some different collections. These are not all the ones that I do, but they're the pictures that I could find. So that pink, purple, blue is the bisexual flag. And so those are all bi pride earrings. The purple, white, gray, black is asexual pride. So people that either don't feel sexual attraction or don't feel romantic attraction to people, or it depends on, you know, they might need to, like demisexual is more like they need to feel emotional comfort and connection before they feel sexual attraction. And I think that it's really important to remember, especially as like straight, cisgendered people, that it's okay if you don't understand someone's identity. You don't have to, but you need to respect it. Just because you don't understand it and you can't wrap your head around it does not mean that you do not respect their pronouns, that you do not respect their partners, that you do not respect their lifestyles. Respect is a very easy thing. It's free to give, and we should all do it, right? And so this is non-binary pride with the yellow, white, purple, black, and trans pride, which is the blue, pink, and white. So these are the pieces that I have up in the exhibit room in the back. I made this piece. It was commissioned, the big piece. It's the biggest piece I've ever done. It took a lot of time, a lot of tiny beads. That one's made with the 13 Charlottes. They commissioned this piece because they wanted to have the people of where their residency is out in Goodhart, out in Middle Village, to remember what land that they're on, to remember that they are on Odawa land, to have that represented for all of these artists that come from all around the country, to know that they are sitting and standing and staying on our land. And so I had a lot of fun making this piece, and I'm excited that now that I've seen the residency and seen the space, I'm really excited that this will be there, you know, for who knows how long. And all of these people will get to appreciate beadwork and know that it's also a supportive, safe space for queer people. And then, so I didn't talk much about pronouns. I I use they or she pronouns, which means that I'm okay with either. They, them pronouns make me feel more seen and validated, but she, her pronouns do not make me feel dysphoric or anything like that. So I made a she, her, he, him, and they, them medallion. That medallion, I decided I'm keeping for myself. I made it for the exhibit and I was like, no, this is meant for me, which is fun to do because I don't often get to keep the things I create. And then I have the different identities. You have the trans flag, the non-binary flag, the lesbian flag, pansexual flag, asexual and bisexual flags, all represented out there. And I wrote a pretty emotional post the other day about this exhibit and what it meant for these things to be represented in this space, in this time. You know, as a young closeted queer person, I never thought this was gonna be my existence. I never thought I would want to move back here, you know, no matter how much I wanted to be with the land, no matter how much I wanted to see my family more. I just didn't think that I could exist here and be queer. And it was I feel like the pandemic kind of pushed me, but also like really honoring myself and all the support that I've gotten from my family and my community helped me make that transition back here. But thinking about, you know, these kids on the field trips, walking through these, you know, they're going to see Odawa art. They're like, okay, cool. But like seeing all this beauty, but then also seeing these flags represented, you know, they might not be out. They might not even have thought about it much. They might, you know, they might be out and they're struggling with that. They might be proud, you know, each person's journey is so different. There is no one coming out story. There is no one queer story. It all looks different, sounds different, feels different. But the fact that they could see that where it just makes me so happy. It makes my heart warm, you know, like it makes me feel good to know that they can see that and make me feel a little bit safer here, a little bit more welcome here, not just in this QueerKwe Art Center, but in this town, in this community, you know? And that's what a lot of my work focuses on, just getting some visibility, because this invisibility is so harmful. You know, we are not represented in media. We are not represented in conversations. We are not included often in POC conversations, like conversations with people of color. And when you don't see people, you don't see their pain, you don't see their experiences, and you don't see their joy. You don't see their love, you don't see their light. And I think that queer Native people have so much of all of those things. There's so much beauty in being queer and Native. There's so much pain in being queer and Native. And we need to hold space for all of that. And so I'm really happy that Liz reached out to me, and I'm really happy that this work is here with the work of my family. It feels like a very full circle. I came home to do this type of thing, and it's been really beautiful. Here's me with my stuff. So that's about it. I have my social medias up there. I have an Etsy shop. Getting ready for holiday sales. I'm out there making a bunch of new earrings out of Good Heart residency. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for holding the space with me. Does anybody have any questions?
We do have a question or a comment. I'm just going to read it. It says, my daughter is part of the LGBTQ+ as an asexual person. I am glad you were out there speaking and educating people. If you are aware of any groups in the area that she could be a part of, could you share them with us so we can share with our audiences?
See, that's the hard part. In this area, there are no groups. There are no resource centers. There's a lack of that space, which I'm hoping that we can change collectively. If they are Native, we do have a TwoSpirit group. We're not meeting currently because of COVID, but we'll get started back up once restrictions lift. And that's a once a month meeting that I'm helping take over with a woman, Brandy Lee. You just come and you can share a meal, and it's just a time to exist with each other.
I thank you for your presentation. presentation. I really appreciated it. I understand that before the white people came and overtook the culture of the Native Americans, that two-feathered or queer people or trans people were actually thought of as being extra specially designated people, because they had extra powers and they could see things, and they were people who were unusual. So they were uplifted rather than put down. Well, so maybe you're really helping to have this come.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Anishinaabe communities, Native communities. Difference was always celebrated. Neurodivergence was always celebrated. Different abilities of able-bodiedness were always celebrated. Queerness was celebrated. You know, that person is experiencing the world in a unique way. They have a unique perspective. It's important to listen to them, which is not what you see out in Western society about conformity and being normal and acting a certain way. Everything is really scripted out on how you're supposed to be. Whereas back before white people came, we just were, you know, and you're right, two-spirit people have always been viewed as sacred, always been viewed as powerful people. You know, they were artists, they were healers. They took in children who lost their families. They took on different roles in whatever was needed in their family and their community. And one way that it was described to me was that, so we think of gender on a spectrum, right? Sorry. We're on a spectrum with the masculine and feminine, and people can exist within, right? And that men and women join together to find balance, to balance each other out, right? Which is kind of what Western society says, but has a very different meaning behind it. You know, it's about like living in balance is a huge part of our culture. And that means your mental, your physical, your spiritual, your emotional. All of those things need to be taken care of and tended to be healthy, right? And so two-spirit people, they don't exist on these ends of the spectrums. They are in the middle of the spectrum. They have that masculine, they have that feminine. They are balanced. They don't need a partner to balance them. And because of that, they have different perspectives. And because of that, not that they can't have partners, but that they don't need that partner because they are already complete, you know, if that makes sense. That's just one way it was described to me. I think that there's so many different ways that people talk about two-spirit identity. But yeah, good point. Thank you.
Not sure how to word the question, but for a white person to wear, say, the jewelry and the earrings and things, is that disrespectful, or is it, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you're asking, and it's a very common question I get. And as long, for my work specifically, as long as you advocate for queer rights, LGBTQ freedoms, as long as you advocate for Native rights and Native sovereignty, you are welcome to wear my work. You know, as long as you are supporting the communities that I'm representing, you are welcome to wear my work. As far as beadwork in general, yes, just buy it from a Native artist. Don't buy these things that are Native inspired, you know, that, yeah, like it doesn't have the same energy, it doesn't have the same power, it doesn't have the same meaning. You know, somebody picked out all those colors, somebody sat there with that earring, somebody sat there with those beads. Maybe they mapped it out, you know, maybe they just went for a free-for-all, which is what I usually do, you know. So just purchase your things from Native people, give these opportunities to Native people. A lot of us, our survival is based on our sales, you know, because we do live in capitalism, and that can be crushing at times. So, did that answer your question? All right. Anybody else? Well, Liz, it's not your turn yet.
That if a Caucasian
person would say to their friends, I don't see color. That is a slam, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same when we say we don't see sexuality? Do you feel that it is turning a blind eye to it?
I think it's turning a blind eye to the pain and the suffering that queer people still experience. Just the same way that saying I don't see color is saying that I don't see you. You know, I think you're the same as me, but people of color are not. They live this experience in this country very, very differently. They are treated very differently. Their safety is different than your safety. You know, so I think it's important to recognize difference. We're not all one people. We don't all have one experience. And that goes for every identity. So I think that saying that, instead of saying, I don't see color, say that I see you as a person, as a being, and all that you are, you know, and do your best to educate yourself on those different identities and do your best to be a good ally. Does that make sense?
I think I'm speaking for myself, being over 60, you know, growing up with the different norms, especially here in our area, which is less than diverse for many, many years. You know, when I was in school, we had one Black family in town, one. And I don't think I ever appreciated what those children felt when they came to school or went into restaurants or, you know, because they were the different ones. So I appreciate you coming up. My husband is tribal. And he's not Indian enough is what they tell him because he has blue eyes. You see what I mean? So I see it with him too, that when he says he's tribal, you don't look like you're enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm very pale. You know, I'm an enrolled member, but I'm very pale. My brother, we have the same parents, is 3 shades darker than me. You know, like I think that it is important to recognize the color-based racialized trauma that is out there, but also for Indigenous people, it's less of a racial identity and more of a cultural community identity. And I grew up with plenty of Native kids that had blue eyes. You know, I know ginger kids that are Native. And it's about that connection to your ancestors. It's about that connection to your community that makes you Indigenous. You know, I think that keep having these conversations. It sounds like you're having good conversations and thinking about things in a good way, and you're trying to understand. And I want to encourage you to keep doing that because we're never educated enough. You know, we can never understand all these lived experiences, but we can do our best to educate ourselves and to take time to think about these things.
Similarly, someone in our virtual audiences, I'm just going to quote, some of us are half-bloods and don't have cards to prove it. It is in my heart.
And also that is something that is a direct result of colonization and violence against Native people. The idea of blood quantum is fake. The idea of being half of anything is fake. You are a one whole being. Blood quantum was introduced from the US government to weed us out. They saw us intermarry, like having marriages with other people and other communities, and they thought that we would kill ourselves off through blood quantum. And so when our communities uphold this idea of blood quantum as if it's always been that way, or if we've always had these hierarchies, that's not traditional. That's not living in a good way. That is literally taking the words of your oppressor and using them against your people. And we need to knock it off because it's harmful. Anyone? No.
No, it's more of a comment though, that just thank you for sharing your story and your experience and your truth. And just know that like at the residency, we have the pride pin that we made. And just people coming from really all around the world to the residency, just seeing that makes them feel more welcome. And so the things you're creating are doing good, very good things in the world. Just appreciate
Well, thank you.
We have one more question from our online audience, and that is, what role does intersectionality play in your work, especially with respect to your queer and Native identity?
I mean, intersectionality is the base of my work. You know, I think that, so the intersectionality is the idea that different identities exist together and those identities working together shape your experience, right? So a Black woman and a white woman and a Native woman, just because they're all women, does not mean they have the same experience, does not mean they can be categorized as simply a woman in their experience, because they all experience it very differently because of their other identities. You know, that could be your racialized identities, that could be your community identities, that could be your ethnic identities, your, you know, socioeconomic status, your country of origin. All of these things impact your experience. And so with my work in the queer community, I never felt very comfortable because the queer communities that were down in Ann Arbor were very, very white. And their idea and experience of being queer looked very, very different, you know? And so that's why I wanted to do this work, is to create that space where that's what I'm focusing on. And I also really like to try, like with these earrings, I like to use like the inclusive rainbow with the brown and Black stripe, because historically, brown, Black, Indigenous folks in the queer community have been left out of conversations, they don't have that voice that they should be having, especially with all of the groundwork that they're doing for not just queer liberation, but liberation of all people. So I think it's really important I've made many posts about addressing anti-Blackness in our own communities, because we have so many relatives. I have relatives in my direct family that are Black and Native, that are white and Native, you know, and all of those experiences need to be shown and heard and seen. You know, representation really does matter. And I think working with the queer community, because that is one label, that does not, you know, growing up in a rural community as a queer person is very different than growing up in an urban community. Growing up, you know, all of these things shape our experiences, and we cannot try to put them all in a box. We're still trying to put these categories and these binaries with them. So I think that any work that anyone's doing should be having an intersectional lens and thinking about things from multiple perspectives. How my heart feels in my work? It feels great. You know, I never thought I would be doing this work. I never thought I'd be comfortable enough to come up here, stand and talk, you know, in front of all these people I don't know. I love that I've had so many different Native queer people reach out to me just to tell me that they found my work and they were so excited. You know, this work is getting to the audiences that I want it to be given to. And I feel very, very fulfilled and grateful and blessed to be able to do this and have all the support that I have. I think it's been, I mean, obviously there are struggles, you know, but like overall it's been a pretty positive experience, both in community, my online community. Like, yeah, I've gotten some bad comments and some people being like, oh, you don't look like TwoSpirit, you look like a woman, you know, and then those are really constructed ideas of what these things need to be, you know, and the whole point of this is that people are just people. Queerness is queerness, and that means something different for everybody. Being Native means something different for everybody. We all have these different connections to our identities. But my heart feels good. Feels pretty full, thank you.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
I really appreciate you being here, Becca, and she's not going to run away. So if you have any specific questions, feel free to come up. And I just want to thank a couple other folks. Obviously, Good Heart Artist Residency. Sue brought some delicious scones that are becoming more and more famous. So check those out. Becca has open studio this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., right? Yeah. So that's at the residency. You can grab a brochure or find Sue. Wave to the folks here if you need to
And it'll be a whole pop-up shop. I'll have all my new earrings up, so come through.
Very good. And I want to thank Roast and Toast for providing coffee today. I want to thank our exhibit sponsors for making this whole thing possible. That's North Harbor Christie's International Real Estate, Odawa Casino, the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians, Petoskey Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation, Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, Michigan Humanities, and Women Who Care. So a lot of people have stepped up to make this possible, and I just want to thank them. And thank you for joining us in person. Thanks for joining us on Zoom and Facebook. Catch us next week.